at least one, you take away one or two items that might be able to help you in your performance. And as I talk about how this impacts your performance, sports psychology is a very detailed, nuanced topic. And what I'm hoping to do today is really just introduce you to some of the basics. This is a course that we facilitate at all the USA Swimming camps, the select camps in the zone level, diversity level, and then both at the national level camps. So if any of you athletes in the audience have been to either the Colorado Springs for a national camp, or if you've been to the zone camps for the LSC level camps or symposiums, you may have some of this may be familiar to you. It is designed really just to wake you up to the world of sports psychology and how sports psychology can have a significant impact on your performance. So we'll get into that in a minute. I am going to share my screen. I will introduce myself with just a few little details, and then we'll get started. So let me get going here. And I'd also, just like to say this is a facilitation or a lecture that we normally do in person. So it is designed to be interactive with a lot of discussion. I think it might be a little challenging. We might need to modify a little bit, but I would encourage you to ask questions when you have them. You can post those in the chat. You can raise your hand. We will try and do a few of the exercises. We'll see how they work online in this Zoom environment. So I just want to begin by introducing myself. My name is Mitch. I'm the senior advisor for the Western Zone, and I tend to focus on these 8 LSCs in the southern part of the zone. I know you are in the northern part of the Western Zone, and I work very closely with my partner, Jane Grosser, who covers the Washington and Oregon area, the northern part of the Western Zone. Having said that, as advisors in team services, and I do like to just take a minute and explain what we do, which is a wide variety of different support and roles across the nation. So we cover as I mentioned, all the different camps, the symposiums. We provide support to our LSCs, but for those of you that are athletes, parents, and coaches out there, which I think is most of you, there might be a few officials on the call, we are your direct link to USA Swimming. So if there is, in addition to what we're doing here today, we also provide direct support. So if you're a coach, if you're a volunteer, a parent, a swimmer, and you need anything from USA Swimming, I would encourage you to jot down my phone number and my email. You can find Jane's email and phone number on the USA Swimming website as well. But it really is our primary mission, is to provide direct support to you as athletes and coaches. Anything we can do to help with your clubs, with whether it's admin, whether it's logistics, or whether it's performance-based. USA Swimming is focused on growth and retention right now, which is something that we hope we can provide support to you as well, to you as a team, as a parent, as a coach or a club admin. So without further ado, I will jump right into the beginning of this, what we call facilitation at USA Swimming. And we call it a facilitation because we like to have you participate and just facilitate the discussion. Now, in this particular case, sports psychology being a little bit more nuanced, we'll do a little bit more of a guided discussion. I do want to begin by saying just a few more things about myself. I just stepped off deck after 21 years of coaching and have been a senior advisor here at USA Swimming for almost 2 years. I tend to gravitate towards this particular topic, not only because I try to incorporate sports psychology into my coaching, as well as in terms of my performance supplement. I know I spoke to Coach Wren this morning about some of the education that you've been going through with things like nutrition and supplemental training and performance. And so sports psychology, I think, is a great fit. I have found that it is one of the areas that most coaches are a little shy to talk about, maybe because they don't have a level of expertise or they're uncomfortable talking about it. And I have found that once you start talking about these things, it really does open up some really important discussions for you as athletes, particularly if you have ambitions to be an athlete at the highest level, at the Olympic level or at the national level. You will see that as we go through some of these topics today, the faster you get, the higher level that you perform at, the pressure becomes greater, the stress becomes greater. And so sports psychology and having a mental strategy or a mental game is really, really important. And so I hope to talk about some of those today. I do want to make mention, I am not a licensed psychologist, so I can't administer any actual clinical advice for you today. I am halfway through a master's degree in sports psychology, which is a non-clinical type of education. But I can certainly talk about these things. And as a world-class athlete myself, I've wrestled with a lot of these same things that we're going to talk about today. So if you have any questions before we get started, please let me know, raise your hand. But what I would like all of you to do in the audience, online out there, and you've seen this on the screen, I would really like you to put a little bit of thought into this list. And I'd like you to try to come up with 5 things, and I know things is a very open-ended word, but 5 things that you need to do as an athlete in order for you to have a successful race. And so that might mean, you know, the night before, you need to get a good night's sleep. You might want to have a certain meal. Or in the morning, you might need to do certain things. You might need your lucky swim cap. Or you might need to have a couple set of goggles. Or, you know, everyone is different with regards to their sort of rituals and traditions that they go through before racing. And because today's discussion is about psychology and how our thought process can impact our performance, I know that all of you have made a list. I don't know if you've ever written them down or not, but I would like you to think about 5 really important things, the steps that you need to go through, and it can be more or less than 5. But what do you need to do as an athlete to have the best and most successful race that you can have? And I'm going to give you a couple minutes to do this. I'll use my timer on my phone, and we'll give you about 2 minutes just to come up with a list. And I am going to ask some of you to share those things. So think about that in advance, and we'll put 2 minutes on the clock for you to go through this little exercise. And again, we're coming up with a list of things that you need to do to have the best race that you can have. Yeah, and feel free to put that message in the chat. If you would like to share publicly, you can. I saw one of those go in there. That is fine. In fact, the more of you that put your thoughts and ideas in the chat, the better. And we'll give you about 1 more minute. All right, and you should be wrapping up your list now. All right. So hopefully you put a little bit of thought into your list. is anyone willing to share their items with the group? Can I get one volunteer just to share some of the things that you wrote down? I see that, I don't want to mispronounce the name, Suya, warm up to get your body ready. So that's a pretty popular one. Can someone else share one of the items off of your list with us? Anyone? A good night's sleep. All right, that is another very popular one. Thank you. All right, they're coming in. Stretching, being hydrated, a positive attitude and mindset going into the race. Excellent. A pre-race stretching ritual. All right, this is great. So thanks, Jack, for a big list of 5. He says a good night's sleep both before the night before and 2 nights before. Good breakfast, but not too much. Lots of water, good general warm up, and a good mindset before the race. Okay, excellent. Getting good luck from your friends and buddies. Okay, a playlist that's going to get you fired up. That can work for some people. Now, I really like this one, packing and getting ready the day before the meet. Alexander, great idea. Good warm up and warm down. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Bringing all of your stuff, right, in a positive attitude. I like that a lot of you have said positive attitude a number of times. Music can be super effective for both helping you get up and calm down, depending on what you need. Perhaps we'll have a chance to talk about that. And so that's great. Thank you, everyone, for participating. I'm going to ask you to hold those thoughts just for a quick second. We have the chat list, so we will be able to refer to it. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen just for a second. I've got a lot going on here. I just want to be able to, in case we go on camera here, I want to be able to see people for this. So thank you, everyone, for those lists. Those are good. We're going to come back to those in just a moment. But this is an exercise that we normally do in person. I don't even know if it's going to work, but I'm going to try it. And I'm going to ask all the coaches, if you wouldn't mind turning your camera on. If you're in a situation where you can't turn your camera on, I get that. But I would like to get all the coaches so I can see what we're working with here and maybe ask you to volunteer going through a quick exercise with me. So Ren, are we going to get anyone besides me and you? Is there anyone else with the camera on? Let's see. I got another.
I'm on.
Alice Tom.
Okay,
Yeah.
super. Let me fix my view here. So I can see everyone. Okay. So here's what I'm going to ask. There's in fact, coaches, if you don't have your camera on, you can still participate, but I'm going to ask you to turn your microphone on. So unmute yourself. And because we do need to be able to hear you for this. So that Mia and Ren, can you unmute so we can hear you?
I've unmuted.
Yeah, I see. What about Mia? Can you unmute so we can hear you?
Yeah, I'm unmuted.
Okay, so we're all unmuted. You can all hear each other. Now again, bear with me because this is usually an exercise that we do in person, and we kind of get in a circle and we face the outside so we can't see each other. And the goal, this is a game. We're going to just play a really short game to illustrate a point. And the game for the 5 or 6 of us is, or the coaches that are unmuted. I can only see you if you have your camera on now because I changed my view. And so if you are a coach and you don't have your camera on, you can participate. The idea is for us, we're going to try and count up to 20. And some of you might be familiar with this game. The way that we count up to 20 is, though, I'm going to start. I'm going to say number 1, and someone else has to say number 2. And then someone else needs to say number 3, and so on and so on. Now, here's the rule. If any of us say the same number at the same time, we have to start over. Okay, so you can't use any tricks or any cues like that. So the five of us that are on the screen, and then any other coaches that can hear us that are unmuted, we're going to try and count up to 20 by alternating. And if we do say the number at the same time, then we're going to have to start over. So let's give it a try. We'll see how this works. Again, I don't know if it will work on Zoom, but let's give it a try. And I'm going to start by saying 1.
2,
3.
Okay, so you can see you can kind of see what's going to happen.
It's hard when you can't see the people. Okay,
we
so
want to make it so that you really can't cheat on this one. So no cheating. Okay, here we go. 1,
2,
3,
3.
All right, we got up to 3 that time. We're going to go one more time, and that's okay. Everyone, you can count whenever it's your turn to count. Okay, there is no order to this thing. Let's see if we can make it past 3. All right, here we go. 1,
2.
3,
4,
5.
All right, we
6.
made it up to 5. All right, thank you for everyone. That is a great game. And I am going to ask someone who didn't participate. Let me share my screen real quick. Let me get back on my slides here. So we'll start off by saying that
Should we mute again? I think we should all mute again.
Yeah, you can mute. Thank you, volunteers. And normally, everyone will give you a big round of applause. And so for those of you listening, I will tell you this. So it was really hard for us to count up to about 5 with only about 5 or 6 people, right? And so what happens when we're in person, we break up into like 10 different groups. And if any of the groups of 5 make it up to 20, then we pull them aside and then we bring them together for one big group at the end of like 10 to 15 people, and we try and do it again. It's almost impossible to count up to 20. And so I'm going to segue into the introduction of this facilitation, which is called controllable versus uncontrollable. I like to refer to this as an introduction to sports psychology. And so I'd like to hear from some of you in the audience as to, I know you didn't get to participate, but here's my question for you with this number game. Why was this game challenging? What was it about this game that 5 people couldn't even count up to 20? Yeah, go ahead. I see your hands.
Because we didn't know what other people were thinking.
Okay, awesome. You didn't know what other people were thinking. What else?
Like what she said. We didn't know when the other people were going to say it, and nobody knew what other people were gonna say. So we just had to guess, and sometimes that resulted in saying the same things at the same time.
That's right. That's a perfect answer. So I saw a note here in the chat, there was no communication. And that's part of what makes the game challenging. So let me throw out a few questions to you. Can you, during this game, are you able to control when other people counted or did something? And I think everyone knows the answer to that, right? Is no. It's why this game was so hard. There was no way to control what the other people were going to do. Now, if you went in order, it would be really easy. But when you just have it open like that, and people can sort of do whatever they want, you can't really control what they're going to do, right? And in that case, you can't control when the people counted. So can someone tell me, I mean, we're talking about sports psychology, and we just played this game where people were counting. How are the two related? Can I get someone to share? Does anyone have an idea on how this game is related to sports psychology? I'll
Do you
give
want
you.
coaches, do you want coaches to jump in, or do you only want kids to answer?
Great, sure.
I mean, you can only control what you're able to do yourself. You can't control what other people are doing.
That's right. And thanks, coach. This is a great way to illustrate that point. So for athletes out there, if you can relate to this game and why it was so hard, you're beginning to understand, I think, one of the most important parts of sports psychology. And that is being able to identify the difference between what you can control and what is uncontrollable. Okay. In fact, just about every facet, every part of sports psychology revolves around this particular topic. And so I like to include, the name of this is uncontrollable or controllable versus uncontrollables. But the reason I gave it the subtitle is Introduction to Sports Psychology is because this really is the first step in understanding how what you think and how you prepare and plan psychologically can have a huge impact on your performance. And the first step in being able to develop a mental plan or a mental strategy is to teach you that there are things that you can control and there are things that are uncontrollable. And so what I'd like you to do is I'd like for a volunteer to, maybe we can go back, Jack. Maybe I'm going to go back to your list because it was so good, if you don't mind sharing with us. But I'm going to go back to Jack's list of 5 items. And Jack said that the number one, I don't want to put them in order because maybe he didn't rank them, but the first item that he listed was having a good night's sleep, both the night before and 2 nights before. Now, I want to ask all the athletes out there, is getting a good night's sleep something that you can control, or is it something that you don't have control over?
Have control.
Okay, tell me a little bit. Tell me a little bit about how you can control your sleeping.
You can try to go to bed early.
Early. All right, great. What else can you do? Are there other things you can do to help you get a good night's sleep, like make the room really dark?
Well, sometimes your body isn't getting a good night's sleep, and your body just decides to, well, not get a good night's sleep, which just happens sometimes because
right.
like body senses that you're nervous and
That's right.
and that there's something like big happening.
That's right.
So you
That's-
might try to like relax a bit, if that helps.
That's right. Excellent. That's a good point. In fact, getting a good night's sleep is one of those unusual topics that is controllable, but sometimes there's these little things that, like you mentioned, that your body senses that something really important is coming up, and so sometimes as you're trying really hard to get a good night's sleep and you're doing all the right things, but your body is still a little bit nervous. Is there anything you can do to help with that? Does anyone think there's something you can do to help with your sleep if you're nervous with the night before a big race? Yeah, go ahead. I'm just gonna, because some of you SA, so I don't know if that's your name or his initials, but can you go?
So I think that maybe you can just try and relax your body with a good story, or maybe just stop worrying about it.
Yeah, and again, I apologize because I'm terrible with names, but Lin Ming, do you have something to add?
Maybe you can make your surroundings really quiet.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, so you make your surroundings dark and quiet, and then the person before you said if you can find a way to relax, maybe to read something, what do you think would happen if you're lying in bed, it's nice and quiet, it's dark, and you have a big meet tomorrow, and you keep thinking about the meet? You keep thinking about your race. You're actually going to excite yourself, and you're going to raise your heart rate, and you might even get a little bit of get nervous, right? And so this is a great example of something that has a little bit of both controllable and uncontrollable. But there are some things that you can do to minimize your distractions. And so we're going to talk a little bit about distractions in a minute. And so this was a really good topic because sleep is something that really does come into play. And let's go to the second point real quick. So good breakfast. I think we might all be able to agree that having a good breakfast something that you can control, or is it completely out of your control? Yeah, Ling.
You can control it by eating less or eating more.
That's right. You have complete control over that, right? But yet, sometimes, I'm sure we've all seen one of our teammates that, at a swim meet, and they said something like, "Oh, I didn't have time for breakfast," or "I forgot to eat breakfast," right? So there's we're starting to see that some of these things that we can do to minimize our anxiety or nervousness by focusing on the things that we can control. And so I'm going to skip over to number 4 in Jack's list. Now, this one is a little bit tricky because Jack said for his 4th point that one of the most important things that he needs to do in order to have a successful race is to have a good general warm-up and a race-specific warm-up. And a lot of times people associate their warm-up with how they're feeling, right? And they want to feel really good during their warm-up. And so is your warm-up, let me ask the question to the athletes out there, is the warm-up something that you can control? Yes.
I think, well, it depends on like if your coach is actually like telling you to do your warm up, but you can also sort of maybe tell your coach, like, I don't think this is the warm up for me. I want to do more or do less.
I love that. That's great. And so being able to communicate to your coach what works for you and what you might need that might be a little bit different. Let me ask you this: has anybody finished their warm up at a big meet? And I know you have a big meet coming up, so let's talk about this because this might happen to some of you, or it may have happened to you already. Have any of you finished your warm up, or let's say you're doing your warm up and you just don't feel great? You're not feeling good. You're not feeling loose. You don't feel like you're swimming fast, and you're not smooth in the water. And you finish the warm up and you just get out of the water not feeling great. Has that ever happened to any of you? And when it happened, have any of you told your coach, "I want to scratch this event"? Like, I am not feeling good. I don't feel good. I didn't feel good during the warm up. I'm just not feeling it. And I really just want to skip this race because I'm not feeling good. And I just want to focus on my next event. And I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands, but I know from my experience, having had this discussion many, many times, that there are probably a few of you that have had that feeling. And I want to share this idea with you. And so as we talk about the difference between controllable versus uncontrollable, and we looked at Jack's list and we talked about some of the items in his list, now we're going to focus on this one idea. And this one idea is that in order for us to perform well, we know that we need to be warmed up. The body works better. We need to have a good warm up. Now, in a warm-up scenario, there's really like 2 different parts to the warm-up. There's the actual warm-up, the physical warm-up that you go through where you're easing into your warm-up and you're loosening up your legs and your arms. And that part we have to do. And And I think we might be able to say that we might all be able to agree that that's something you can control. Now, there are times where the warm-up pool might be too full, or maybe even it's closed, or maybe you don't have a chance to warm up because the meet is running ahead of schedule or behind schedule. Those are all things that can sort of add to your anxiety and make you nervous. But the idea that you can actually go through the warm up that your coach has prescribed for you, or the warm up that's good for you in order for to have the best swim, that's something that's controllable. I think we can agree on that. You have to be, you have to have a physical warm up, and you can control that. But let me ask you this: in the scenario that I talked about, what about how you feel? Is how you feel during the warm-up something that you can control, or is that a little bit less certain? In other words, what do you do if you finish the warm-up and you don't feel good? Has that ever happened to anybody? And what do you do in that case? Someone want to share that? I know it's happened to
This may not be the most helpful answer, but I just get up and deal with it, and I don't do anything.
Okay, just deal with it because you got a race, right? Anybody else have a different strategy?
Sometimes, like I just like my coach has me do dives as part of the warm up, and then sometimes the dives just help me relax because I like the feeling of diving in the water.
That's great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like doing something you like.
Anything you can do to sort of bring that feeling of comfort, something that that makes you feel good, makes you feel better, is really important. I want to share a story with you. One of the cool things that I get to do in this job is I get to be around Olympic athletes and talk to them about all different kinds of things. In fact, this particular topic that we're talking about right now, Ryan Murphy, who I think most of you might know, Ryan Murphy is one of the top backstrokers in the world. He's our Olympic gold medal hopeful coming up in Paris 2024. And I just had a chance to see him last weekend at the Golden Goggles in Los Angeles, which is like a big event. Anyway, Ryan is very, very open and very sharing with his experience. One of the things that Ryan Murphy talked about in this idea about warming up and how you feel, which I want to share with you, because if it can happen to an Olympic athlete, it can happen to any one of us. And Ryan had talked about at a camp, we had him at a camp, and he spoke to the athletes, and we were talking about controllables and uncontrollable, and we were talking about the warm up. And Ryan said that there have been a number of times where he has finished the warm up, had like the best warm up that he ever had. He's feeling great, really confident, and then thought he was going to have a great race. And then he went into the race pool and had like not his best race, even though he was feeling really, really good during his warm up. And there were other times where he really struggled to get through the warm up. Like he wasn't feeling loose, he wasn't feeling smooth, he wasn't even feeling fast. And then he went out into the race pool and had one of his best races of his life. And so he started this idea for his warm-ups that he was not going to let how he feels affect his mindset going into a race. And I thought that was really important to share with all of you because, as one of the best backstrokers in the world, for him to get out of the pool thinking, oh, I don't feel good, or to get out of the pool thinking I'm feeling really great, and it doesn't seem to have an impact on his performance, I think it's important for all of you. And so point number one is that if you finish a warm up and you're feeling great or you're feeling terrible, just remember that how you feel in the warm up pool doesn't necessarily, in fact, in most cases, doesn't translate over to how you're going to perform. But the more important point that I want to make, as we kind of, we're trying to frame this in, how do we learn from this lesson? And so we know that warming up is controllable and that you can go through the steps of your warm up and you can do all the things that you're supposed to do during your warm up. And if there are certain things that make you feel better, like diving or sprinting or doing something in your routine, those are the kinds of things that you should try to do to get you feeling better. But what I want to spend just a few minutes talking about is this idea that if you finish your warm up and you're not feeling good and you don't have a lot of confidence, I want to share that that is something that is what? It's uncontrollable. You can't decide how your body is going to feel. You can't always get out of the warm-up pool feeling great, like you're going to have the best race in the world. And so these ideas that when they creep into your head, where I didn't have a good warm-up, so I don't feel like I had a good warm-up, which means that I'm not going to have a good race. That is what we call a distraction. And distractions are anything that is uncontrollable. And so again, today's topic, controllable versus uncontrollable. We talked about the first steps in being able to recognize what is something that's controllable, what is something that's uncontrollable. And if you're focusing on something that is uncontrollable, it's a distraction. And here's what I want to share with you. And this is a really simple idea, but anything that distracts you, anything that is a distraction, is going to take away your focus from the things that you should be doing. And so as you realize that something is a distraction, it's really important for you to shift your focus and focus on what you can do. So what can you control? Okay, I got out of the pool. I don't feel like I had a really good warm-up. I don't feel great, but what can you do to sort of make yourself feel better in that case? Does anyone have an idea on what you can do, or what can you tell yourself to make yourself feel a little bit better if you get out of the warm-up pool feeling like you're not ready to go? Does anyone have an idea? I'm going to ask if any of you finished your warm-up not feeling great and then went out and had a really good swim afterwards. Can I see a show of hands? Has that happened to anyone? Okay, a bunch of you. So in this case, just like Ryan Murphy, you can just tell yourself and remind yourself that I've done this before. There were times where I didn't feel like I had a great warm-up and I had a great swim. And I happen to think that that's a really, really important point for all of you to remember, is that just because you feel a certain way doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to perform a certain way. And so I'm going to kind of move into the tail end of this idea, and then maybe we can open it up for some questions or talk about some other things. But as I mentioned, and just kind of like a recap on this one really important topic, is being able to understand what is controllable and what is uncontrollable. And so we're going to focus on the uncontrollable items. And I think just like a physical warm-up, there are things that just like a physical warm-up in a race, there are things that you can do before, during, and after. And so we know that when we go to a meet and we're going to race, we know that there are certain things that we can physically do to prepare for our race strategy, for our warm-up. We can talk to our coach about our execution plan. How fast should I swim the first 50, and how do you want me to swim this event? And I can make sure that I have a really good warm-up and stay warm and stay hydrated, and all the things that some of you put in the chat over there. Those are all the things that you can do to prepare yourself physically. But what can you do? And I want you to think a little bit about what can you do to prepare yourself mentally. And one of the things that you might be able to do is to prepare yourself ahead of time that I'm going to go do my warm-up, but I want to remind myself that I might not get out of the water feeling great. I might feel kind of like I don't feel like I'm really ready to race, but I'm not going to let that affect me. I'm going to push that thought aside, and I'm going to focus on the things that will make me go faster. And so we want to shift our focus from uncontrollable to controllable. We want to shift our focus from feeling like I didn't get a good warm up to I'm going to get a really explosive start off the blocks. I'm going to hold my streamline, dolphin kicks, big breakout strokes. I'm going to accelerate into the wall. I'm going to really push to the finish. Those things, those cues that help you race faster, those are the thoughts that you should have in your head versus I don't feel like I had a good warm up. The water's too cold. Can we control how the temperature of the water? We can't control the temperature of the water. Can we control whether it's hot outside or cold outside? I know in the Pacific Northwest, you swim a lot indoors, so maybe that doesn't apply as much in California, where I live, but the water could be hot, the water could be cold, the air temperature could be hot or cold, and the truth is that we don't have any control over those things, and so we have to look at those as distractions and do whatever it is that we can to minimize them. And then the point in the second bullet is refocusing your attention. How do you refocus your attention from something that's uncontrollable to controllable? And the truth is, we have to recognize first the difference between the two. And when we see something that is uncontrollable that we focus on, like someone is in the next lane to us that you don't want to race, or you were assigned lane 8 or lane 1, and those, obviously no one likes to swim in 8 and 1. What do? You have to recognize that the lane that you're in is a distraction and has no effect on how fast you can go. And so you push that thought out of your mind and you focus on what you can do. And those are the things that help you swim faster, like an explosive start, all the tight streamlines, the fast turns, etc. And then the last item is this is something that you evaluate and you practice and you get better at. So every time you go to a high pressure event or a high level swim meet where you're experiencing anxiety and you're nervous and you're scared because you want to do really well, the more you practice focusing on the things that you can control versus the things that you can't control or that are uncontrollable, you get better at it. This takes practice, just like your swim practice does. And so if you're someone that wrestles or struggles with a lot of these things because they distract you and they take your focus away, the more you practice, the better you will get. And you know, I was just watching a video actually earlier this morning. One of my favorite sports psychologists and just reminded me about professional athletes. And one of his points was that if you talk to an Olympic athlete or a professional athlete in the NFL or NBA or Major League Baseball player, professional athletes will tell you that their performance once they reach that level is about 80% mental and 20% physical, because they've mastered the physical skills. And for them, it's all about being mentally focused and having a mental game plan, right? A mental strategy. Now, when you're younger, it becomes a little bit more physical. And as you get older and faster and better, you will have to focus on the uncontrollables, and your focus on your sports psychology. Really, really important. So I'm going to pause there. This is a good point to take a little break and open it up to some questions. If you have any, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have and see where this leads us.
You have any questions?
And what about, okay, so post the questions here. What about, can someone tell me, did they hear anything today that they're going to try and use when they race coming up? I know you have some big meets coming up. Can anyone think of something that might be helpful for them going into this big championship event that you have? Coaches, any comments or anything I might be able to help with from on the coaching end?
Hi, Mitch. This is Alice. Yeah, if you could talk to them a little bit about, kids who just can't seem to get the chatter out of their brain when they get up behind the blocks. You can be talking to them about a strategy to go over before the race, and they seem all good, and then you see them behind the blocks, and they look like, a zombie because they're just like so freaked out from being behind the blocks, and how to get past that point so that they can, not be so distracted by whoever's next to them or whoever's, whatever's happening around them that they can't control. Is there any tips you could give them to, try to work through some of that nerves? These are younger kids, as you can imagine, and we've got a mix on this. We've got all the way from really young kids all the way up to high school kids. So it's not always the same for everybody, but, there's a lot of stress that especially the kids go through before they get up.
Sure. Well, the one thing that I think many sports psychologists agree with is that it is really important to have some sort of mechanism, some sort of thing that you do that refocuses you. And so, but can I see a show of hands? I know there's 4 rooms here. I can't see everybody, but did that question resonate with any of you from your coach about like the chatter, the noise, and all of the distractions in your head? I'm assuming a bunch of you. It's a very, very, very common problem. And most sports psychologists will tell you that the way that we deal with this is the ability, and Coach, you kind of touched on it, the ability to refocus. And for some of you, especially if you're a little bit younger, it's sometimes you have all these thoughts racing in your head. Your parents are telling you one thing and your coach is telling you another, and you have your teammates and everybody's watching you, and it's a little bit nervous. There's a lot of excitement and energy. And so the sooner you can come up with a strategy for yourself to shift your focus from all that noise and all those distractions, the sooner you can learn how to do that, the better. And most sports psychologists will tell you that there is a very simple yet effective way to do that. And that is to have a trigger word that cues you to refocus. And for some of you, it might be simply the word focus. Focus. For others, it might be race or start. But if you can think of one word that can bring you back to your focus, I happen to like the word focus because when we're not focused, we're distracted. And if I get distracted, if I'm looking over here, and I really should be focused on all of you in the room right now, but I'm looking out my window right now because there's some birds flying around and they're kind of taking my attention away. And if I can just focus, just say that word, focus, and it brings me back to my focus, that is a really effective way. I know it sounds a little silly, and I know it sounds like it's not a very scientific or sophisticated way to do that, but let me share why it's really important that it's one word. Because when we get into these high pressure situations, or you're really stressful, or you have a big meet, like you have a big meet coming up next weekend, I think, or in 2 weeks, and there's all this stuff going on, your plan in your head, your strategy has to be really simple. Why? Because you're already nervous. You're already anxious. And so the last thing you need is a big long list of things to go through to get you focused. What you need is one word, race, focus. Come up with that word on your own. That word cues you that you are about to race. And that cue should then be fast start, explosive start off the blocks, tight streamline, hyper dolphin kicks, big breakout strokes, fast turns. That's what you're doing. You refocusing yourself from the noise to what you need to do to have the best race that you can have. Now, I said I know that sounds a little silly and simple, but it's really effective. And the more you do it, the better you will get at it. You'll get to the point where something distracts you and you just focus, and then you get like this. You're just really, really focused. So I hope that helps. I hope that you will practice it. And coaches, I hope you can share that with your kids. Most of the swimmers, when they face anxiety before an event, this is another topic maybe for another time, has to do with the anxiety comes from a place of concern from an athlete that if they don't perform well, then maybe mom and dad will be upset with them. And if they don't get a certain cut, maybe the coach will be disappointed with them. Maybe they feel like they'll let their teammates down if they don't win, right? And the truth is that your parents will love you no matter whether you get disqualified or if you win the race. And your coach likes you as a person, not so much because you're a swimmer. They like you. Your coaches like you for who you are as a person. And your teammates like you because you're their friends and you have fun together, not because you win every race. And so you have to remember that being an athlete is hard because we think that people will like us more or think we're cool or respect us more if we're faster. But the truth is that people evaluate you based on who you are as a person, not as an athlete. And so if we can figure out that how to deal with that idea, it tends to reduce a lot of stress as well. So there's a couple things that work when you're nervous behind the blocks. But for all you athletes out there, just remember that your coaches love you and like you and want to be around you, whether you're fast or slow. And your parents love you, whether you win or whether you get DQ'd. And this sport is all about having fun. That's not to say we can't win races and swim really fast and have goals to make it to the Olympic team. But I do have to tell you, even as recently as last Sunday night at the Golden Goggles, listening to dozens of Olympic athletes talk, many of them talk about the same thing, and that is how much fun they have in the sport and how important it is to be around their friends. And it's not only about winning; it's about you being around people that you love and you care about. So if you can add that to what you think about, it does tend to take away some of the stress as well. So I hope that helps. Let me see if there's any other questions here in the chat. How do you go into your next race after having a bad race? That's a tough one, but if you think about it this way, most of you have had some really good races somewhere along the line, and they're going to be followed by a bad race. Then you're going to have another good race and another good race, and guess what? You're going to have another bad one. It's going to happen. So I think the way that you think about going into your next race after a bad one is having bad races is part of being an athlete. And the best athletes, they bounce back. They recognize, okay, I had a bad race. Every race is not going to be my best. There's going to be times where I add time, and I just need to focus on the next one and the next one and the next one. I've had the good fortune of becoming good friends with Janet Evans. And Janet Evans, some of you don't know, but she was a world record holder in many freestyle events. Went about 20 years ago or longer. And Janet went a period of over 4 years where she didn't drop time. And so you have to remember, you're not always going to drop time. You're not always going to win the races. But the best athletes, they bounce back. They put that one behind us, focus on what's ahead. Let's see, this is a question. Yes, I can answer that question in the private chat, and it has to do with a camp application. So I think, Ren, this might be a good, I'm happy to take some more questions, but this might be a good point to break a little bit and see if there's anything else that we would like to talk about.
Yeah, I think we can stop here. Looks like there's no more questions. Again, I want to thank Mitch for taking the time and thank everyone during the holiday break to join us for this wonderful lecture. And like Mitch said, we do have several championship meets coming up. I wish everyone good luck. Wish our swimmers have a good race and a good championship. Send us questions to Alice or PDST to me, and I can compile. Maybe we can invite Mitch back for more comprehensive and more specific topics in the future. Again, thank you, Mitch, for the wonderful lecture.
Thank
Goodbye
you,
now.
Mitch. I really appreciate it. It was a great lecture. Really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you.
Everyone, and for the athletes out there, good luck. Good luck at your meets coming up, and I hope that you'll apply some of these lessons and stay more focused. You will have better races, and I look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.